Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Bridge, the Art of Filmmaking, presented by Golden Gate Films. I'm your host, Charlie.
And I'm Liz, and today's episode is incredibly special. We're so excited. This is From Speed to Stardom, Victoria Sampson's award winning journey.
That's right, we are honored to welcome a true Hollywood legend joining us live from Los Angeles. It's a woman whose career spans over 40 years with more than 200 feature film credits, an Emmy Award, 4 Golden Reels Awards from the MPSE, the Motion Picture Sounds Editors, and a legacy built on excellence, artistry, and innovation.
Right. Her credits include Speed, and we've all heard of all of these. Speed, The Fifth Element, The River, Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, Pirates of the Caribbean, Ordinary People, and countless more. She's a sound editor, sound designer, writer, director, and an inspiration to generations of filmmakers.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the extraordinary Victoria Sampson. Welcome, Victoria.
Hello, everyone from everywhere. I brought a couple friends with me. Here they are.
Ooh, there they are, right front center stage.
Yep,
All
and
right. So let's
um,
let's
yeah.
get started on our questions. We have a lot to cover today. So Victoria, we were going to beginning with a quote that we love. Sound is the story behind the story. Do you agree with that, Victoria? And how do you see working as a sound working as a narrative force?
Well, a lot of people, I think of sound as a technical part of filmmaking, and it's really, we try to tell stories with the sound. Like it's not just sound effects and dialogue and footsteps and backgrounds. It we create the world that the film takes place in, because the goal of the production when they're shooting is to record the dialogue as cleanly and unobstructed as possible so that we can always add sound, because we can't always take it away. So we want to add the sounds to it and layer it. So, if you're doing a scene in a music club, you don't have music going while the actors are talking, because then the sound gets married and we can't unmarry it. We can't divorce the sound. So that's the reason why, and my mom, who is the legendary Kay Rose, who won this Oscar for The River, she always told people, don't think of yourself as a technician. Think of yourself as a filmmaker, because you're telling the story with sound.
For many filmmakers, especially new ones, sound editing is a mystery. So, can you say what exactly does a sound editor do, and what does your job truly entail?
Wow, that is a loaded question, but I'll do my best to answer it. Um, it's not just young filmmakers who don't know. I've worked on some big films where even the director, they just sort of like put sound in the corner, like put baby in the corner kind of thing, because it is a mystery. And um, what we do everything sound wise in a movie except the music. We have music editors that help with the composer and plan out where the music's going to go, and they edit the music. But the sound editors, we do a lot. So you have the production sound recording that's done on the set or location, which is very intricate. And depending on what kind of film it is, we call them like a walkie talkie, like a rom com, or a big action explosive, like Pirates of the Caribbean. Um, so all of those have production sound recording, which I always tell young filmmakers, make sure you get a really good sound recordist, because you're going to be sitting in the editing room for months at a time, listening to all the mistakes over and over and over. And there are ways to fix the mistakes. The famous thing is, fix it in post, people say. I always say, fix it in prep. Like, think of it ahead of time to eliminate the problems on the set. And I could go into that if you remind me later. I
Well,
try. I'll
my
try to
question
stay.
was actually my question on that note was when does your role start? And you sort of answered that, during the shoot, pre-production, in post. Is that right? I mean, all along, or
Well, it would be nice to start in pre-production on a film, but so often we come on so late in the process that nobody, you know, like I don't know, the production mixer who's recording on set doesn't know that I'm going to be doing the sound 5 months down the road or something. So, we don't usually interface. I know in England, a lot of times they will hire a script consultant, a sound script consultant, to go through the script and kind of examine where places would be, needed, which I could also go into. That's one of the reasons why my mom won the Oscar for The River, because Mark Rydell, who's the director of The River, he cares enough about sound and knows about the sound process that he hired my mom and another separate sound recordist to go to Tennessee to record all the sounds that were happening in that location: the farm trucks, the cicadas, the cornfields, the smelting plant, all, the machinery, the cows, because there's nothing like getting authentic sounds that go with the movie you're watching. Because as sound editors, we have libraries of sound effects that have been used over and over and over, and really it's the context of the sound that makes it unique and different if it works for that part. If you listen to a lot of TV shows, you'll hear the kind of the same car door close over and over and over. Um, and most people don't pay attention until it starts to get like really annoying and repetitive. But let me go back to the roles of the sound editor. So we have production sound, which is recorded on the set. That has to be finessed and set up in a way for the re-recording mixer, who's the person responsible for adding all the sounds, mixing them together. It's like we have the ingredients for the cake and they bake it, is how a good way to think of it. So all the sound editors, the sound effects editors, so we add in things like gunshots, door closes, car chases, explosions, alien worlds being blown up, any of those kind of things, whatever the movie needs. So sound effects, and then there's Foley, which is actually sync sound effects that are done on a sound stage with various little surfaces for walking. So anybody walking and moving things. If I set this down while I don't know if you can hear the
Nope.
pound on the table, but if I'm talking while I set that down, we can't use it for what we call the foreign version, or the music and effects, or M&E version, which every major film has to have. So if I'm talking, I set this down, we have to replace that sound, because when we take out my English dialogue, there will be no sound of this setting down. That makes sense. So everything is replaced 100%, walking and movements. We call them props. So a dog walking, on a table, little footsteps and stuff. All of that, a horse clip clops, sword swings, fring, fing, especially if a fight scene, the face punches. A lot of those are augmented with sound effects, but all the movements of the bodies being hit, punched, whatever is done. They watch it on a screen on the sound stage, and then they mimic what the actors are doing. So it gives it a very personal element to the sound. It's not just, oh, let me sample those footsteps and just click on a keyboard and go doot 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 doot. It would sound lifeless. So, and a lot of us in the sound world right now are a little bit worried about the AI stuff happening,
Hmm.
because it can easily replace what these Foley artists are doing. And they call them Foley walkers. And then there's background sounds, which has another editor who does background sound. So background would be like, let's say we're on a ship, like I worked on Under Siege. And when I first saw the movie, it looked laughable, because it's like all these guys running around on a ship, which is a sound stage, and very like minimal everything, right? You just say, how can we sell the fact that we're on a ship? I mean, we could all be on a ship right now unless we were all doing this, and even then, you don't really move on a big ship. So John Rush, who's the premier Foley artist in the world, I should say, and he worked on that with me. And we took a metal bin, and we put the microphone next to this kind of hollow metal bin. It used to be a trim bin for hanging film pieces. Actually, when we had when we had actual film, and it has little sprockets, and you could hang it on these little hooks. And so it was a big empty thing about 3 feet high. So we put the microphone next to this bin, so when he walked his footsteps, it would have this slight metallic ring off from the bin that it was next to, this aluminum sound. So it's a very subconscious. I think a lot of sound is subconscious.
Hmm.
You don't know that you're what you're listening to, but we carefully construct all of these layers to give the audience that feeling that they're in that world.
Hmm.
So backgrounds would be like wind, rain, uh, snow, any kind of weather. Like on Fifth Element, it was very hard to come up with backgrounds because I can't go out in space and record space traffic on my recorder. You know what I mean? It doesn't exist. So we had to create like layers of, sound designed space vehicles as a background, just
Well,
as the background of the movie.
I wanted to ask
So
you about that.
all of those, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. All of those functions. Then there's also, as part of dialogue, as part of production dialogue, we call it dialogue editing, and it's really production dialogue editing. So anything that's recorded on the set is what we edit, and we have to smooth all that out. But there's also another function of dialogue, which is ADR, which stands for automated dialogue replacement, and that's where the actors come in and re-record their dialogue on a soundstage because of sound problems, or if they want to revoice an actor, or if they want to add more voices. There's also a part of it called group ADR, or looping, because it used to be a loop. You had to make a little loop, like of sound, an actual physical loop that went on a machine over and over, and you'd hear it go, "Hi, how are you?" And then the loop would go, and then there'd be a space. So, "Hi, how are you?" "Hi, how are you?" And the actor would listen to that and just repeat it.
Hmm.
And then that evolved into being able to automate the start time of the dialogue so that the actor would hear like beeps, like beep, 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 talk. So and all of that has to be programmed by a sound editor or an ADR editor, and then all of that gets recorded with the actors on a soundstage, which we'll talk about speed later on.
Yeah.
And because of generators, wind machines, you can record the dialogue, but it's going to have tons of noise on it. Which again, you want the voice as clean as possible because that's usually where the story of the film is.
Mm.
Would
So those are pretty much all the functions.
would a lot of those things be called or classified ambiances?
Yeah, they'd be ambiances. Yeah. But they're very important because the dialogue's going to come out of the center speaker usually,
Mhm.
because it's very disconcerting to hear like this disembodied voice coming from like the right speaker, and then the camera angles change during editing, right? So a sound that may start on the right, the next shot is the reverse of that actor, and then the sound would be coming on the left, and that would be very disconcerting. So ambiences fill in the space. So you have like dialogue in the center, left, right, right surround, left surround,
Hmm.
and then of course now we have Dolby Atmos, which has sound coming above us and all around us. So all of that is part of background sound effects. So it
So
could be
speaking,
just air. Sometimes it's just air. If we were shooting a scene with all of us, we would just have air, unless we wanted it to be raining outside.
speaking of all of these wonderful things that you get to design, what are your favorites? Do you have any favorite sounds, effects to design? Car chases, alien ships, creature sounds.
um, hmm. I think it depends on the type of film it is. Like I did a short film that was a kind of a tongue-in-cheek comedy about an actress who's trying to get a role, and you find out in the course of the short film that she just says, "Do you want pie with that, or do you want coffee with?" That's her whole line, but she goes through this whole way of delivering it, like with a southern accent, like as if she was in a honky tonk saloon. So I put in, she makes a gesture of her hands like coming out with like, so I added some like ricochets and gunshots and gun coming out of the holster. It's just her hands. But since the movie was like all in her imagination, I was kind of free to add some cute things that added to the humor of the movie. But
Excellent.
I really don't consider myself a sound designer like a lot of sound effects editors are.
Hmm.
I can do it, but it's not my favorite thing, and I do it very basically. I mean, a lot of these guys have like major, tools to create these sounds. I have like my library of sounds. Sometimes I just record sounds myself. And so I'm not. my specialty is like production, dialogue, editing, and ADR. So I like the challenge of figuring out where the problems are and the best way to fix it that's integral to the movie. Because directors and actors, a lot of them don't like to come in to redo their performances, and I can totally understand that because a lot of sound editors go, well, it's a technical thing, we have to do this. But it's like, no, you have. And I teach students this because I also teach. I said, you have to remember how hard it is to be an actor in that part. They're coming in months after the film was shot. Their heads are probably in another role, and they have to recreate that moment on a bare sound stage, not to any other actors. So it's you have to respect their process, and I encourage any sound editors and filmmakers to take acting classes just to know what it's like to be on that end of
That's
of the camera.
that's fascinating. Well,
Yeah.
how about we get into your world a little bit and start with
Okay.
some of your work, Ordinary People, the late great Robert Redford's first film as a director. It won Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars. Let's pull it up. This is an interview with you in a documentary production that we'll talk about later, but it's about ordinary people in this particular clip. Should we pull that up?
And if you're hearing those, that takes you out of the story.
So I put that up right now. Here we go. Here's the clip.
That's why we edit the dialogue. My mom is Kay Rose, and she was the first woman to win an Oscar for sound. She could hear clicks and pops that shouldn't be there, take it out, fill it with ambience, and be very smooth. Ordinary People was a movie my mom and I worked on. And it was one of the hardest sound jobs we've ever done.
Tragic.
The movie is about a family affected by the death of their older son. The surviving son goes to a psychiatrist.
Hi. Yeah, come in. It's okay, they all do that.
And they chose an aluminum warehouse near an airport
Jared,
for these very intimate scenes with the psychiatrist.
sit down.
Which was awful.
I had a fairly strong idea about sound, but I had not directed a film before. So I needed help, and she did just a great job.
It took weeks to try to get out the little clicks and pops in planes
Boating accident?
for 10 minutes of production dialogue. Weeks.
You want to tell me about it?
The silence was meant to illustrate pain. The disconnect between people.
You can go upstairs to that room of yours and clean out the closet. Because it really is a mess.
Wow.
That's
So okay, that's intense, and I want to ask so many questions, but we only have one day. We'll be here till midnight. What was it like working with Robert Redford, and how did it feel watching that film win Best Picture?
He was pretty extraordinary, I must say. As an actor, he knew timing of things, and he also had a great quality of reaching out and getting experts to be with him at his side. There's some directors who think, oh, I can do all of this, and I don't need help, kind of thing. And he was very gracious in recognizing that, he's not an expert in certain fields. And so that's why my mom had worked with him on The Way We Were with Barbara Streisand. And so he knew her work from that, and wanted her to be part of his sound team. But every movie I do, I learn something from. Like on that movie, I asked them, like, why did you choose an aluminum warehouse near an airport to film these very intimate scenes? And it's a mistake a lot of people make, like location scouts. They go, wow, look at this location, it's the greatest thing ever. And then you get the soundtracks back, and there's like, kids getting out of school at 3 o'clock, yelling and screaming, or there's an airport, path that you're flying over. And so I tell filmmakers, I said, go find your locations. Great. Go there, close your eyes, and just listen to the environment and check the time of where the schools are and when they get out of school, and are there going to be a lot of cars picking up kids, and just various things that you wouldn't know just by looking at a location. Because, yeah, the camera sees this, but then our ears hear everything else. And again, you want to get the cleanest sound recording you can. So it was great. He was a wonderful storyteller and filmmaker, and I love the breadth, of space that he left in the film for people to get as uncomfortable as the boy, as Conrad was, the character
Hmm.
that was played so well. Yeah.
Extraordinary in the sounds are and the absence of sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to, uh, create a soundtrack with the absence of sound being the main quality that they're looking for.
Hmm.
I did another film with Shirley MacLaine that was like that with Nicolas Cage, and they had the same thing. It was like a story of a former first lady in the winter of her life, and it takes place in the winter. So you can't have chirping birds. You have to have winter type birds that of tree, the trees with no leaves on them. What do you do? So every now and then I would put in a crow, a crow caw, and other, birds that are indigenous to that area in the winter. But that's what we did with Ordinary People too. It had to be very stark and cold sounding. It's like, what does cold sound like?
Hmm.
I mean, anybody who lives in snowy places, there's a certain quiet that snow has. I don't. I'm in Southern California. Snow is something you visit up in the mountains, so I don't. But when I go to visit my daughter in Denver, for example, and it's like, wow, there's snow. I just love the sound of quiet. It's like insulation to the world's noises. It's
Hmm.
very interesting. Yeah.
We have a live comment, so maybe it might make sense to address it now. Farley asks, very interesting to hear about it. He remembers watching the Academy Awards for decades, not knowing much about the awards for technical areas. So, how would a young person get started in your field? How do you acquire the skills or develop talent stacks that would help you get noticed and get hired and eventually become a leader in the field?
Wow.
Oh, I like that, talent stacks. I'm gonna
Yeah.
steal that. That's a cool phrase. How do you get your talent stack? Um, well, nowadays, I mean, when I started, in the last century, um, you learned from people that you worked with. Like, you were hired as an apprentice editor and you learned on the job. Nowadays we have schools, that almost every school, even high school and junior schools, middle schools, are teaching filmmaking, because you can make a film with your iPhone. And but you still want to get good sound. I want to stress that. Um, so you just start making films, or you go to film schools and you ask the film departments, hey, does anybody need sound editing? I use Pro Tools. We all mainly use Pro Tools, which is an Avid product. So it interfaces with the Avid professional film editing. It pretty much interfaces with everything nowadays: DaVinci, Adobe Premiere,
Hmm.
and you can edit that in Pro Tools. It depends on where you. Let's see, what I say? Yeah, the technical awards. You know, they used to make fun of all that. Oh, even in cartoons, like, oh, it's the sound editing award. It's time to get up and go to the bathroom. Like, we won't miss much. And so it's also, I think, educating the audience about it. It's like an opportunity. And I've been on, Academy board, the executive board, where we've discussed, like, we need to not make fun of it. Please don't have the writers make fun of the sound, like they wouldn't make fun of the acting awards. And they've tried for years to kind of get it off the broadcast because they think people don't like it. I said, then make it something exciting. Make it a part of people's knowledge that they don't know they don't have. So I think to get started is you take some film classes. Even community colleges have film classes now, and just try to concentrate on the sound end of things and say, I'm interested in that. Because once you get up on Pro Tools, then you can approach schools and say, "Hey, I'm a newbie sound editor, and I'd like to do the sound on these short films." So I think that's the best way to get your feet wet. And also, if you like sound effects, get a good recorder. I have a thing called a handy Zoom, which I'll show you real quick. And you can go out and record your own sound effects. I mean, it's very
Huh.
compact and easy, and it looks like this, a handy Zoom, you know. I guess,
Oh,
where is it in focus? I don't know. Anyway, it's called a handy Zoom, and I even record, like, we can, if we need, if I'm editing something on these independent features and shorts that I'm doing, I'll say, "Oh, I need a line of dialogue from the audience member." Well, as opposed to getting a group of loopers, which I didn't finish talking about, but it's a group of actors who put in the background voices in a scene. So, like at a restaurant, an airport, any scene that has a lot of people in it, those extras are told don't talk during the shooting. And so a group of actors come in, and it's basically improv, and they provide all the voices in the background of a scene,
hmm.
and they get residuals. It's a very lucrative place to be if you're in SAG, especially. You get residuals. I mean, my daughters were both loop groupers. In fact, you can hear one of them in Ordinary People when they do a Halloween scene. And I think she says trick or treat or something. But they get residuals. And they were little. They were like 8 years old, and they still get residual checks for like $10, 6 cents, but I mean, it adds up, especially if you're doing it. But it's a great place to start.
Yeah, Farley says Talent Stack actually comes from Dilbert and Scott Adams, and that's where he got it from, for
Oh,
the
okay.
ideas where the
Interesting.
skills
Oh,
stack.
cool, cool.
But I think,
Yeah, I
Liz,
like that.
you had a final question on Ordinary People, right?
No, I think
Like, when it comes to, didn't Ordinary People win the Best Picture?
It
oh, yeah,
did.
I
Yeah,
asked how did it
1980.
feel, right? Was it?
Oh,
Okay.
it was so great that he got that for that, because it was a very, it's a very difficult film. And um, it was Mary Tyler Moore's first dramatic role. And I remember when we previewed it in San Francisco, that's when they let us go to previews to gain knowledge from the preview audience of their reactions to the films. I
Mhm.
don't think sound editors do that anymore. I don't even know if they have previews anymore, but it's great to go to a preview. If you get asked, to go to a preview, go to it, because you'll see a work in progress, basically, and you can have your hand in saying what you think should be done to fix the problem. But anyway, so the preview audience, they had a sequence where she's coming down the stairs holding folded towels, and people started laughing. And we're all looking at each other like, why are they laughing?
Hmm.
And we realized that it was because Mary Tyler Moore was a comedic actress, so they thought anything she's in is going to be funny. So they had to change, like, the opening of the film to get people acclimated to the fact that, no, this is a tragic story of this woman. She's,
Right.
in pain from losing her son, and being mad at the surviving son, and the whole dynamics of the family. So yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, so
Well,
we were thrilled that it was done. And Donald Sutherland. I mean, I have stories about Donald Sutherland coming into Loop, because he was notorious for, he did not like the beep method of, I told you before, beep 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 talk. He did not like that. He wanted the picture scored, which means a big white. You take a razor blade and you score the actual film,
Hmm.
like this, and it would be like an empty line going through it, and it would go from like left to right. And when it got to the bottom, is that when he talked. And he wanted to do his whole speeches. He didn't like breaking it up into little sentences like we do. And then he would get up on a ladder and, like, check the sync to the film that was being projected. And he was a character.
well, I'd love to ask you about this crazy story that happened in your career. So you were flying to London with the 35 millimeter film reels of Star Wars Return of the Jedi for ADR sessions with the English cast, and the reels were stolen from your car. Can you share what happened there?
I sure can. I think things that are out of the ordinary, things that happen in our lives, those are the moments we really remember. Like you get caught in the rain in Montana while you're camping with your kids, and it was awful at the time, but it's a great story now. Anyway, so yes, I was flying to London. It was in January, so I thought I needed thermal underwear to go to London because it's a third world country, as we all know, and so I had the film in my car, and these are big reels. I don't have any handy right now, but they're big, reels like this big, and they're probably about, I don't know, 2.5 to 5 pounds each, of about 1,000 feet of film. So I had 10 for the picture, 10 for the track, with two big boxes. I had my clothes in the car, and my briefcase that had the cue sheets, because as I say, you have to cue every line of dialogue that the actor says to a footage. We use time code now, but to a footage, so that the machine knows, oh, at this footage I put the beeps. And I had some clothes that I had packed on, and I had my two daughters in the car who were like 6 and 8 at the time. And I stopped at the sporting goods store in Hollywood to get thermal underwear, and I thought, oh, I'll only be a few minutes, but I had this intuition, like, don't leave the car, parked on a street in Hollywood. I was in my '67 Mustang. I come out, I go in, come out, and I see the car windows smashed, and I see the film was stolen. I was like, oh, and I probably did say a bad word at that point, um, in front of my kids. And then my little daughter, she puts her arms around me. She goes, "Well, mommy, at least they didn't hurt us." It's like, yes, but you don't understand. This is Star Wars. It's like, so I had to call up Lucas. It was about 9 o'clock at night. I'm supposed to be on a plane at noon the next day. And I said, "Hi, it's Vicky. The film got stolen out of my car." So they called in detectives who came down and searched through all the trash cans in Hollywood. They had to call in an assistant editor to overnight deconform the film back to the version I had queued to, because they're constantly editing. As you know, we have to lock in a version to have the numbers match. So that was the version of the film that I had, and they were already a couple versions ahead of editing. So they had to deconform the film. My mom went out and replaced a couple of the clothes. She had gotten me a London fog jacket. They did not take my briefcase, which had my passport and my tickets and my cue sheet. I was naive. What could I say? The world was naiver, more naive back then. I don't know.
Yeah.
And and so the assistant comes to the airport, hands me the boxes of film, on a cart, and it's like going back to San Francisco that day, and I flew to London, and it was my first like overseas trip, and I get there and they whisk me off to Abbey Road Studios, where John Williams is conducting the orchestra for Star Wars, and George Lucas is sitting in a corner with big headphones on, noise cancellation headphones. And I kind of went like, "Hi, I'm sorry." And he's like, "Oh," like that. But it's the only Star Wars film I've ever worked on. You think that has something to do with it? No, but other than that, it was a great experience to go there and do that. And it was Alec Guinness's first time doing ADR. And I had asked him for his autograph, and he's like, "Oh no, my dear, I would like your autograph. You've been so helpful today,"
Oh,
kind of thing.
sweet.
And yeah, it was great. And that movie, I'm telling you, every movie you work on, you learn something. Everything in life you can learn from if you're paying attention. But I'm a big believer in breathing. Like, it's the secret to life, besides everything. Because when you take a breath, like, everybody take a breath. Go ahead, take a breath. Do you see how her shoulders went up when she took a big inhale like that? So when you do ADR, you don't often, capture the breath, because they're breathing while the beeps are happening. And back then, the beeps happened out loud on the speakers so the actor could hear them. So beep, beep, beep. During the beeps, you're taking the breath, because at the end of the imaginary fourth beep, you're going to say your line. So I'm doing this scene with one of the stormtrooper guys, or he's in the stormtrooper place, and it's like a medium shot, like what we are right now. And he takes a big breath and then says his line. So I was, being diligent, looking at the sheets, listening to every take that they were doing. and trying to remember, like, does he inhale anywhere? Because I knew that having an inhale makes the ADR look like it's not ADR,
Oh
because
my,
ADR is very stark. It's not life. We can make it that way with mixing. But anyway, so I said, could you please, can we just beep in for the breath? And they all looked at me like I was out of my mind. I said, trust me, you'll thank me later. And so they did. They beeped in, beep, 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 and then they attached that to his rest of his words, and they all were, wow, that's really good. And so weeks later, after I got back, they're mixing up in San Francisco, and I'm down here in LA. And they called me and they said, okay, you were right. That was a really good thing to do, because nobody can believe that line is ADR'd. So that's what I
wow.
like to do for ADR. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I want to show another masterpiece, as another
Okay.
clip, if you don't mind, on the river,
Hmm.
starring Mel Gibson and Sissy Spacek. You worked alongside your mother, correct? Again, so and
Yes, my mom and I mean, I started with her like in 1973 on a Mark Rydell film called Cinderella Liberty with James Caan and Marcia Mason. And then, Mark always called my mom to do all his films. So when I joined the team, then I was along with that too. I mean, we did ordinary, not ordinary, on Golden Pond, The Rose, The River, For the Boys, a really funny film called Harry and Walter Go to New York, which nobody ever knows or sees, but it's full of stars in it. It was an amazing little film.
put that
Anyway,
on my list. I'll have to put that on my list.
okay.
So your mother, won, who won the Special Achievement Oscar on sound editing for this film. Let's pull up that clip.
All right,
Okay.
it's coming, and here we go.
You don't always tell me everything.
You don't always tell me everything either.
Lives can change. I can make them change easy.
Now, we got a contract, Harv.
If the core's no good, neither is the contract.
Now, don't you send some flunky to come and do me, and you have the guts to come and do it yourself.
Sooner or later, there's going to be too much rain.
You can't hold back the river with a wife and two exhausted kids. Why won't you get any help? Guys,
Wow. So you can really feel that. Like you've got me paying attention to all the things going on, like the water and and the changes in the sound. And so working with your mother, what was that like?
She was an amazing editor. As I said in the clip from Making Waves, the moviolas are very loud machines. I mean, now we're all on Pro Tools and it's very quiet. You just hear people clicking, but moviolas are like, really noisy. And she could she could cull out through her ears like sounds that shouldn't be there, because sounds that shouldn't be there disrupt the audience's enjoyment of being lost in the film. If you notice a wrench dropping off stage, it is not a diegetic sound. It doesn't go with anything you see in the movie. It's disturbing. And so her theory of cleaning up production sound was to take out those sounds. And if you take something out, you have to replace it with something, because otherwise it's out of sync and there's a hole. So you replace it with the ambience that's behind the words in that scene, and that's kind of the art of dialogue editing. That's why it was so hard to do Ordinary People, because the production mixer heard the noises going on in the background, and he lowered the recording level on his Nagra. And then when we got it to do the sound, we had to raise everything back up again, which brought up the whole noise floor and exposed all kinds of noise and junk. So it was that's why it took so long. But for the river, all the water scenes, are machines that created the water and the wind. So none of that was usable. The only thing in that clip that you just showed was the boy saying to his dad, "Dad, it's going." That was actual production sound that we then topped with other sound effects to make it, threatening. But again, you got water machines, rain machines, wind machines, all going recording that. But you want to record it anyway, so at least you have a guide track. Because if you don't use even things that you don't think should be recorded for sound, record them, because somebody writing on a piece of paper, if you get the sound of that on the set, I can't tell you how long it takes to sync up, sound that sounds like it's in sync with that writing. It's very time consuming. So get it anyway, because some people say, oh, it's just B-roll. B-roll is like where the main actors aren't there and they just go out and get pretty shots of things. So the first 10 minutes of The River, I encourage people to watch it. The first 10 minutes, if you watch it without sound, I do this for my classes. And then I say, well, I don't tell them how long it is. I just show them the first, 10 minutes. I said, how long did that feel? And they go, I don't know, half an hour, 20 minutes. And then I go, it was 10.
Wow.
And then I play it with the sound, and the sound, of course, moves everything along really well. So it was challenging, but as I said, my mom, went to Tennessee with another sound mixer, because the original sound mixer isn't going to want to use his day off to go and record sound effects that are going to be used, months down the road. But Mark knew. Mark's one of my favorite directors, Mark Rydell. Because he's an actor's director, but he also cares about all the other processes of the sound, even like what the janitor is doing, on a preview, or a dolly grip can move a dolly, make a nice dolly move, and he'll pat that guy on the back and say, "Good, that was really good," And so it makes people want to work with you, as opposed to some other directors where you go, "Oh, I can't wait to get off this film," no matter how good it is. It's like, it's not worth it. There's no reason for abuse in movie making. And I hope the days of abusive directors is over, because none of us need that. We're all working on the movie as a collective collaboration, and it should be. But sound is very subjective, and I think that's one of the issues with it. Because it's sort of like the pain chart in a hospital, where it goes from like, I'm really in pain, to I'm okay. Because it's subjective. It's like, I asked somebody once, I said, well, I don't know how to judge how much pain I'm in. Like, I don't know. And she goes, well, childbirth is 10. I went, okay, I get it now. But, sound is like, I worked on a film called Frailty with the late, great Bill Paxton. He was a joy to work with, too. But he's from Texas, and the movie takes place in Texas, but they shot it in Alhambra, California, a little small town in Alhambra. And he kept saying, I want authentic Texas crickets. It's like, okay, so he hired a couple sound effects guys. I was always on to do the dialogue and the ADR for that film. And the first guy says, no, those don't sound like Texas. So he fired that guy for other reasons too. Another guy came on, same thing. So the third guy came on. He went to Malibu Creek and recorded frogs and crickets at Malibu Creek, put them in the movie, and Bill said, that is authentic Texas crickets. Thank you very much. So, it doesn't have to be labeled Texas crickets, but, it has to sound like that. Like, we all have a different idea of what a good, face punch sounds like, Speaking of that, like, that's one of the few copyrighted sound effects that you can't use any face punch from Rocky, which was done by the great late Frank Warner, or the clock ticking from 60 Minutes. Those are copyrighted sounds.
Oh,
All
yeah.
the other sounds are really not copyrighted. Although some people try to sell libraries of sounds, to things, but you're supposed to be able to use them for many films. So,
Well, we've got
does that answer your question? I feel like I went off on a tangent on that one.
It's okay, because we've got a live comment for a subjective question for sound.
Okay.
The question is, what is your favorite movie for sound or sound effects?
Good question. It better be one that you worked on.
One that I worked on. What's
No,
what's funny about me is that because people say, how can you watch a movie? Don't you like pick it apart and, every little sound that bothers you or something? I said, no, I want to watch the movie for the movie, just like anybody else. I want to get lost in the story. So the only time I notice, things is when here I have a shirt that explains it. Can you see that?
What does it say?
I'm the sound gal. Nobody notices what I do until I don't do it.
That's right. That's right.
Because it's supposed to not draw your attention to it. So like I tell people, if the movie, the guy is sneaking down a hallway, why are we hearing his footsteps? If we hear his footsteps, isn't the bad guy going to hear his footsteps?
Right.
Or unless that's the intention, or the good guy, vice versa. So I was actually watching a couple student episodes last night at a class I was teaching, and they have a scene where a kid runs into a church and he like throws himself in on the floor and it makes a big noise, but the priest doesn't react to it. And I said, well, you got two choices. He can either, make it bigger and the priest still doesn't notice it, or you take the sound out because he doesn't notice it. So, those are kind of story points that you do. So I think, um, mm, uh, like one of my favorite films that I did not work on is The Gods Must Be Crazy. Did you ever see that
Oh,
about the
that's a
Coke bottle that
great
falls into?
movie with all the little
It's a
clicks
great
and
movie.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible sound job, a terrible, terrible sound job. But it's like we don't care. We're lost in the movie. And I think that's a great example of like, well, why do you bother taking out all these sounds if it doesn't matter? And it's like, I don't know, it matters. It's like if I know how to fix something, I have to fix it. It's just in my DNA, I think, because I know how to make it better and not as so I think yeah, my favorite movie for sound effects.
You want to think on
Um,
it? I'll give you another question, and if it comes to you later.
okay, yeah, it's hard to come up with them because I tend to go by the story as opposed to sound effects. Like Ironweed was a film that I supervised that wasn't a popular film, and and it had a lot of sound challenges. But it's like the work I'm most proud of, actually, on that
We're
film.
gonna
But
look at that
anyway, yeah,
clip
the
in a
Coke
bit. We're
bottle.
gonna look at that clip in a
Oh,
bit.
okay, cool,
Yeah.
cool. All right. Yeah, what did you want to ask?
Yeah, so your mother, Kay Rose, became the first female sound editor to win an Academy Award. Then in 2002, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg endowed the Kay Rose Chair in the Art of Sound and Dialogue Editing at USC. So the question is, how did you get that news and what did it mean to you personally?
Um, it was really great because, Spielberg and Lucas both considered my mom kind of their mentor, because she was best friends with Verna Fields, who was the film editor of Jaws and later became vice president of post production at Universal. And I have funny stories about swimming in the pool at Verna's house where, uh, Spielberg came over with his Springer Spaniels and wanted to swim in the pool. And then he's at one point he says, "Vicky, we have to do a reshoot on Jaws. Can you get out of the pool now?" kind of thing. But so that's my childhood. Okay, it's pretty weird. But um, okay, so I lost that train of thought. What?
So your
Oh,
mom
the
got this great award,
Oh
this great
yeah,
honor, and
yeah,
then
the achievement. So yeah,
yeah,
okay. So so they both wanted to give her something before she died. She died in December of 2002, and they kept postponing this ceremony. And finally, I called Spielberg's office. I said, if you postpone this anymore, she's not going to be around to receive all these accolades, and like you better do it soon. So they did it in October of 2002, and a couple months later, she passed. Um, but it really meant a lot to her because the this award, when you said it's a special achievement, I don't want to go through all the rules of the Academy about what that means, although I probably should just for clarity. But it's back then, you could either get a special award or it gets voted on by all the sound branch members at a screening where they show like 10 minutes of each film and then you vote right then and there. We don't do that anymore. It's all part of the, but they did that because who better knows what a good sound job is than the people who do that for a living, right? If a film like The River, which is not a big explosive movie, but it was up against Terminator, okay, or Terminator 2, one of those big noisy. How is a little film like that that's got nuances of sound editing going to fare with 4,000 actors in the sound in the Academy who think that sound effects means big splashy noisy movies, right? So that's why they voted for it to win a unanimous vote. And then it went before the Board of Governors, and they said, yes, okay, her peers have voted this. This is what she's getting. And so Spielberg and Lucas wanted to do that, and she was very moved by it. She wasn't a big spotlight kind of gal, and she wanted to. I wanted her to be able to enjoy it. And so they had the big ceremony at USC with the red carpet, and Johnny Williams with the USC marching band, went down the aisle. They had interviewed a lot of directors she worked with and editors that she worked. They even interviewed my daughters, who talked about her grandma, their grandma. And they showed that. And while we were watching the ceremony, she turns to me, she goes, "This is really a big deal, isn't it?" And I went, "Yeah, Mom, it is. It's a really big deal."
Wow.
And so I was just very happy that she was able to, enjoy the evening and take in all the praises from everybody. So
Wow. That's
it's,
a beautiful
yeah,
story. So, shall we
yeah,
look at some more clips from your journey?
sure,
So,
sure.
another memorable film you worked on, another memorable film, is Ironweed, directed by Hector Babenco. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It stars Jack
Hmm.
Nicholson and Meryl Streep, both Oscar nominated for their performances. So let's pull up that clip of Ironweed.
Why did you kill me?
I didn't mean to kill you.
A coward. He'll run. You have no arguments to justify what you did.
I got arguments! I got arguments!
I know a lad, and when I feel bad, he scares all my troubles away. A fat lot, you kid, spending every penny we get and drinking whiskey.
They crawl all over your nose and your nose. I got the money!
Hey, Jack, what's the chances of a bum getting a drink? Makes me a sandwich.
Told me that I could stay. But you can't because you're a pain in the ass. They don't want you. You're the worst that ever happened to me. You're gonna hit me now.
I'm not. I love.
Wow, another one. So Jack Nicholson and Meryl Streep certainly gave powerful performances, but how do you think the sound mix helps make their emotions feel even more real on screen?
Good question. It was a challenging thing because I had to find steam trains, sound effects of steam trains for that film. And my Foley editor, she's like, "Well, I know of this guy who filmed uh, he recorded steam trains because he knew they were going to go out of, business. And he recorded them. He's also, let's see, O. Winston Link, his name is. O. Winston Link, and he photographed big format things. You've probably seen his photographs of kids at a drive-in in like the 1950s with a steam train passing by, and they're at a drive-in theater. He's kind of known for that one, but he also recorded the sound. So I contacted him, and he sent me like 10 cassettes of sound effects of all the trains he recorded, with the stipulation that I could only use them for Ironweed. And I said, okay, and so I put those in. So I think, we had to suppress all the modern sounds. I think that was how sound contributed to it, because we had to. There's a scene in the film where the sound recordist mic'd down by their feet, looking up towards their voices on a street scene, because they didn't want to record the modern traffic that was behind them. That's just in the city in Albany where they shot. And so, of course, all the footsteps had a lot of grit in it, like grit just all over the place. And the only way back then that you could take out the grit was to take a degoused razor blade and scrape little X's on the film itself, on the soundtrack of the film itself, to dampen the sound of the crunch. And I was like a 90-second scene, which is about like this much film, took me, I don't know, 2 days or something to scrape all. And if you scrape too much and it ran into the dialogue, you have to order a reprint. It's like now a lot easier. You just hit a button that says depop or declick, and it helps that and fills it in, because everything you take out, even if it's a quarter of a frame, you have to replace with ambient sound. So I had programmed that scene to loop, to revoice, because of all the grit that was all over. And it's a very intimate scene, but it's really destroyed by all the noise. So
Wow.
Nicholson comes in, he goes, I don't want to do this. It's like, okay. He says, I'm not very good at doing this. I said, don't worry, I'll help you. And I love that part of the process where I actually get to direct these famous actors,
Wow.
and the director is there too, but Hector just said, yeah, do your thing, kind of thing, and I'll chime in if I need to, because he's still there to guide the performance and stuff. So I said to Nicholson, I said, okay, I will do my best to get out all the grit with all the tools that I have available if you will just do a couple passes of this. So he reluctantly did it, and it wasn't very good at all, because actors know if it's not good, they're not going to use it, and then they have to use the production sound. So it's like, okay, so I did work very hard on it, and we ended up using the production sound.
Hmm.
But there's a scene also that normally music composers and sound editors sort of have a feud. At least it used to be that way, where it's like, no, I want my music. No, I want my sound effects. Can't we all get along, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And there's a scene where he goes back to his home where he lived with his wife, where his baby died. And it's a kind of a long, high shot of a street lamp, and it's raining. And it's a very poignant moment. And I put in a thunder crack, and the composer also had some music, and the composer stood up and he said, please take out my music, that thunder says it all.
Oh,
And I
wow.
went, cool, yeah. John Morris was the composer of that, I think. So that's the power of sound, is like creating this environment. And there's a whole thing with all the ghosts, like Nathan Lane was a ghost on the bus. And it's a very depressing movie, so people didn't really gravitate toward it. But I remember when Meryl Streep came in to do her ADR, there's a scene where she's like dead on the floor in the movie, and she doesn't move. I mean, I've looked at that film over, not an eyelash flickers. And I said, how in the world did you stay dead on the floor like that? And she said, I had them turn on the air conditioning so it was really, really cold, and I just laid on the floor in between takes. Like, I never got up, I never moved. I just stayed on the floor, and they did all their setups and all that stuff. And she said, I just was dead. It's
Wow.
like, wow. So, yeah.
That's great. I wanted to ask about the quieter moments or background sounds. How do they help us understand what the characters are going through or make the world of the film feel more alive?
Good question, too.
You mean just in general, or for that film?
Oh, just in
In
general.
general? Oh,
Well,
okay.
either way, whichever you prefer.
Well, my mom always said the story dictates what you do to it. So you have to know your genre of the movie. Like, I can use the same sound effects for a comedy as I can for a horror film. It's all what's on either side of it. It's like that famous film editing experiment where they had an old man's face, and they just used the same footage, but in front of it they put like a young couple pushing a baby carriage, and then it cut to the old man's face. And people said, oh, he's thinking about his child. Then they did the same thing, same footage of the man's face with like a cemetery. Oh, he's thinking about his death. So it's really context that creates the emotion that we're trying to feel. It's like, so, what do I want to evoke in a scene? And I like audio black holes. Now that's a phrase coined by Ben Burt, I think, in one of the Star Wars movies. I can't even keep track of them anymore. There's so many. But an audio black hole is like a beat of silence, like complete silence, where everything drops out at once.
Hmm.
And I liken it to a roller coaster ride. And I'll talk about that when with the speed clip. Well, it won't show in the speed clip, but when
Oh,
the bus
we are
takes
gonna
off, yeah, when
show.
the bus takes off and lands on the other side of this gap, there was a great place for a black hole where the sound should just drop out. It didn't in that. They didn't choose to do that, but I liken it to a roller coaster that's, you're going up the roller coaster and you get to the apex, and
Yes.
there's that moment of just complete and utter silence and wind before you drop down. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's that feeling, and I think it reminds us of the contrast of, when you can do a contrast of things in life, it really helps, to have that black hole of sound
Well,
or absence of sound.
sorry, I
No,
interrupted.
go ahead.
Sorry. So speaking of speed, we do have a clip, and this is interesting for
Okay.
me to look at because it's comparison between what it's like before you do your magic and what it's like afterwards. So this is an action masterpiece. Love this film, of course, full of explosions, tension, movement, and iconic moments. Sandra Bullock received multiple nominations for her performance. Here it is.
How you doing? Are you all right? What can I do?
When that bomb went off, I thought that was it. I thought that was the bomb, and I was dead. And then when I saw her body fall under the bus, it was like...
I'm glad you were still alive.
I'm so sorry.
Don't be. You should be glad. We all are. Doesn't mean you don't care.
I know, she was so scared.
She was scared. She was a nice lady who didn't deserve to get killed, but Annie, if she'd gotten off, he would have killed us all. He's the asshole, Annie. The guy who put us here. Remember that, okay?
Big asshole.
How are you doing? You all right?
Oh wait, can you pause it for a second?
Sure.
Paused.
Yeah, so I just want to say, like, I want you to notice where the changes in the ambient background behind his character. All of a sudden, I can't remember his name.
Keanu Reeves?
Yeah. Anyway, so the door of the bus is open, so you're hearing the open air coming through, and that's one of the main challenges of dialogue editing is to try to smooth that out. So the options we have are to either put the loudest sound underneath everything, which would have just muddied up everything else, or to ADR it, because there's really no way nowadays we could maybe able to fix it, which I've realized, but what we did in deciding to ADR all the bus scenes was all ADR. So the actors, even the background actors, came in and redid their dialogue, and they knew they had to do it because that was the director's decision to have an actual moving bus. She wasn't actually driving it. There was a driver like underneath, but it was a moving bus. And of course, the conceit of the movie is it has to stay above 60 miles an hour or it blows up, right? But it was only going from like second to third gear, so you could hear every time that the bus changed gear, like that. So there was no hope for that. So we, looped it, and but what it did was it gave Keanu a chance to redo his performance completely. Like this was his first film, I think, after Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So he had a lot to convince people that he was a hero. So he deepened his voice. He made himself like more manly, which you're going to see in this, and it made it more intimate. Like you had a hard time understanding what he's saying to her in the scene in the production track, and now we're able to be much more intimate and reduce the level of the sound effects in the background, like manipulate that level better because it's separate. Again, you can always add sounds, you can't always take them away. So, okay, go ahead. Just wanted to clarify that.
When that bomb went off,
I know.
I thought that was it. I thought that was a bomb, and I was dead. And then when I saw her body fall under the bus, it was like...
You were glad you were still alive.
I'm so sorry.
Don't be. You should be glad. We all are. Doesn't mean you don't care.
I know, but she was so scared.
She was scared. She was a nice lady who didn't deserve to get killed, but Annie, if she'd gotten off, it would have killed us all. He's the asshole, Annie. The guy who put us here. Remember that, okay?
Big asshole.
So you just answered my questions about the cutting room floor. That story was great. Charlie, go ahead and.
Yeah, from a sound perspective, what were the biggest challenges? You mentioned, the gear and stuff, but is there any big challenges there?
For speed, Well, just to get good performances and get good sync. But you hear how like intimate he was. Very, she
Yeah.
did care. I did care, and she was a good lady, and didn't. He was able to, which makes the audience lean in more because you want them to lean in to be involved in that. So that was the challenge of just getting really good performances. And Keanu, we had to fly up to Canada every weekend for like 3 weeks in a row because he was shooting Johnny Mnemonic at the time and then coming into ADR on Speed Saturday and Sunday. So he had no day off for like 3 weeks or something. Poor guy. But anyway, but he was very cooperative and he did a really good job on a funny story if we have time. So in the movie, the bad guy, you know, um, he planted the bomb, but they figured out that he could see into the bus, and this is the defining moment where he looks at the back of her jacket and he says Arizona Wildcats, which was written on the back of her jacket. And we did like 20 takes of that line, and one or two line or three word lines are really hard to loop because you have to put all of that context. It's like, think of the different ways you could say I love you, like you could say it with hatred, you could say it with passion. So you don't have a whole lot of words to get your feeling across. You have three words to, you know what I mean? So when he said Arizona Wildcats, it just wasn't jiving. It just was. It's the moment where he realizes the guy can see in because he can see the back of her jacket. And what are we going to do about this? So we did like 20 takes on a Sunday night. And yes, Dennis Hopper, thank you, Farley. um, and 20 takes, and then we all just went, something's not doing it. So we came back again the next weekend, Saturday, did another like 25 takes. Finally, on a take, and this happens a lot on the ADR stage when the actor gets the sync, the performance, the volume, the level, everything is like right, you get goosebumps, you know? Everybody in the room gets goosebumps. And so he said Arizona Wildcats. It's like, yes, that's it. That's the take. And really, if you listen to them all back, they probably sound very similar, but there was something about doing that one line that he finally got right and everybody felt it in the room. So it was kind of cool.
That's
But,
amazing. Those are great
yeah.
stories too. You could go on and on about
So
those.
I don't know if I answered Charlie's question about quiet. What was that one?
I
Quiet
think
one?
it's
I don't know.
fine. It's all good.
Yeah, you did. So if you don't mind, let's switch gears and talk about another movie. This
Okay.
is called Donnie Darko. All
Yes.
right, so truly iconic in its genre. It's directed by Richard Kelly, starring Jake Gyllenhaal, Drew Barrymore, and Patrick Swayze. Its sound design is unforgettable.
Absolutely, especially in the Frank scenes where the sound builds tension and mystery. The film went on to win 12 awards and earn 17 nominations, including the Saturn Awards and the Sitges Festival.
Yeah, Sitges. Wow. Okay. And Victoria, with all that recognition, how did it influence your approach to sound design or sound editing, particularly in those Frank scenes where you had to balance fear, mystery, and ambiguity?
Yeah, good question. I mean, Richard, this was one of his first films, and I was very impressed that he wasn't haughty about it. He's like, I'm going to defer to your expertise. Please teach me, about what you can do. Because if people don't know what's possible, then they don't know what's possible. And he was open to hearing possibilities because again, sound is such a subjective part of filmmaking. It's not like you see a visual and you like it or you don't. Sound, you have to decide on what works, and it's a lot of experimentation. I again was basically the dialogue supervisor and did the ADR, and then I had a fellow who did the sound design and sound effects. But I had my hand in all of the departments, and so he would run past me with the thing, and we'd take it to Richard, and he would agree or tweak it or something. So it's really training your ear to notice things and to realize like what things layered together are going to work the best. And I think with Frank, because we had to keep the secret for a long time, in the movie. Otherwise, people would guess it too soon, and I think that was due to the sound that and it's become a cult classic now. They play it every Halloween at the Aero Theater in Santa Monica, and they invited me to come. I think it was last year or 2 years ago, to talk about the experience of working on it and stuff. And so that was fun. And really, the fans knew more about the movie than I did at that point, because it was like the 20th anniversary or whatever it was. I don't know, but
Right.
it was a cool experience because of the story. Again, the story dictates what you do to it. So to build those layers, and the music was so great too. The way the music wove in and out, and yeah.
That's great. I wanted to ask you about another big film you worked on. It's Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. It was nominated for Best Actor, Best Makeup, Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, Best Visual Effects. I'm gonna play a clip from the film trailer, and the question after is, how essential were sound editing and mixing to making the world come alive? So here we go. We have Pirates.
Hello, Bobby. They've taken Elizabeth. Welcome aboard the Black Pearl. We must save her. Where do we start?
Jack Sparrow. He talked about the Black Pearl.
Make a deal with him. He can lead us to it.
You forget your place.
You are a blacksmith.
If you spring me from this cell, I shall take you to the Black Pearl and your bonny lass.
You're a pirate.
Forgot one very important thing, mate. I'm Captain Jack Sparrow. Not sure I deserve it. You're not facing normal pirates. Cruel, demented, vicious pirates, to be certain.
Say goodbye. Goodbye.
But cruel, demented, vicious pirates who cannot be killed.
The moonlight shows us for what we really are.
That's interesting.
We are cursed men.
I hardly believe in ghost stories anymore.
Sorry about that. So the question for you is, how essential were sound editing and mixing to making that world come alive?
Oh, like 1,000%. I mean, without it, it would look like a cartoon, without the sound. So yeah, there's so many elements, and the usually we get what's called a lined script, which is what the script supervisor kind of takes notes on each scene, each take, and normally a script is 100 pages, 120 pages, and the line script has in between pages, and maybe it'll come out like that big. On Pirates, we had line scripts that won't even fit in the screen here. They were like this big, like 4 volumes of them, because they did takes A to Z, and then they went A B, A C, and I mean, like hundreds of takes on each setup, and a mic, and there was like a mic on every actor in a scene. It was insane to edit that film. but but that's all the practical stuff, and nobody takes any of that in consideration when you're watching the film. So the excitement is all the noise, all the the sword swings, the skeleton footfall. I mean, that one footfall may involve like a bone crunching sound, the heavy thud of the landing, the actual fluff of the dust going up. So it may have 10 pieces of sound to make that one image.
Yeah, I was
You know
going
what I
to
mean?
ask
So
you
that's
about that one, because that was pretty, just that one little moment was pretty amazing.
yeah. And the film is made up of all of those moments. Like, just so much sound goes into each little thing. The creaking of the rope, the swinging on the, and it's also, do we, there's always the decision, do you go with like music or sound effects, or can you have both, because sometimes people want to just have music and make it very, ethereal, kind of like it's not real, it's not practical, it's, in someone's head. And that's a conscious choice you can make on the re-recording mix stage, where they have mixers who do, usually it used to be 3, now there's mainly 2, sometimes 1, a person who mixes the dialogue and the sound effects, and then a person does the music. So, and all of those are balanced together to make the, you know, make the sound work where we wanted to. Now, on that film, like Jerry Bruckheimer would come into the stage and he'd listen to a playback of, he's the producer, listen to a playback of the reel, and he'd say, lower the sound effects, lower the music, got to hear the dialogue. Like even Jerry Bruckheimer does these big blockbuster noisy movies. He insists that we hear the dialogue as clearly as we can. So that's why I like dialogue, because I like solving problems. But
Yeah.
but
So
yeah, the sound effects on that was pretty amazing.
yeah, beautiful. So you were also featured in a documentary that we kind of saw a clip of it at the very beginning of the show, called Making Waves. And this is, people think of this as the definitive documentary on sound in cinema, alongside Spielberg, Lucas, Nolan, and David Lynch. How does it feel to be a part of that documentary among such legendary directors and sound artists? And why should
Yeah,
everyone and why should
every film student, everybody should watch it. It's I remember we took Midge Costin was the director, and she is the USC, or she was, I think she's retired now, but she was uh, the the chair of my mom's endowed chair. She was like the person, the K Rose professor, they called her, at USC. And she had been doing this for years, gathering interviews. I mean, I think I shot that interview many, many years ago, but they had to wait to get the copyright laws to cooperate with them to show clips from the movies. So it took them a few years to do that. And I remember taking my mother-in-law to see the film, and I've known her for like 30 years, okay? And she turns to me, she goes, "Oh, is that what you do?" Like she finally got like what it is that I do, because it's, I have a funny story on Golden Pond about meeting Katharine Hepburn. And Katharine Hepburn, I said, "I'm the sound editor on Golden Pond, and I'm very happy to meet you. You've been my idol for so long." And she goes, "Sound editor? Sound editor? What the hell's a sound editor?"
You
Like,
did that
oh
accent
my,
so well, and that's a very hard
thank
accent
you.
to do. Wow,
Thanks.
kudos to you on that accent.
But she had no idea that, she goes, "I don't remember seeing you on the set." And I was like, we come, later in post when the movie's all put together. She had no idea that we existed to make to enhance her film acting. So,
That's really
uh,
fun. Speaking of that, on the technical side, what software or sound editing tools do you use today?
well, we use Pro Tools, which is an Avid product, and it's pretty funny. When it first came out, they were trying to get us 35 millimeter editors to acclimate to this new system, right? It was about 1990 or so. And so they sent us to a conference, and the guy's showing me the computer and how it works. And I said, "Well, how do you make a splice?" And he says, "What's a splice?" And I said, "Well, you have one piece of film, you cut it in two, and now you have two pieces of film." And he says, "Oh, you mean separating a region?" I'm like, "What's a region?" So
Yeah.
we were just like talking, and a lot of the editors, including my mom, they just couldn't handle computers. It's computers. It's not tech. You can't touch it, and you don't have film running through your hands, and you don't have, Moviola is a simple machine. It has a forward and a backward pedal and a film head and a sound head, and then you had a sync block that you could only basically put the picture and the track, the guide track that goes with that the film editor cut together. And then you have like another spot for any kind of sound to put in, a sound effect.
Hmm.
So back then you could not hear how it was going to sound all together until you got onto the dub stage, the mixing stage.
Yeah.
In Pro Tools, of course, you have all the tracks running at the same time. You can have 100, 200 tracks, music, sound effects, dialogue, everything all together. And so, these older editors, they couldn't make the switch, so a lot of them just retired. I mean, I tried to show my mom, like, here's like, imagine this space between the region, was just fill leader, and she just couldn't wrap her head around it, because you had to learn a whole And of course, when the studios, they didn't know what was going to happen, so various studios had different platforms. Like there was audio, Waveframe Audio and Foster Foundex, what was it, Fostex Foundation, and then there was, so people, used to be able to go to a studio and sit at your moviola and do your work. Well, now if you went to Fox, you had to learn waveform, and if you went to Universal, you had to know Pro Tools. And if so I had one editor, she's like, my head is like crazy. I know 4 different systems, and they're all different, and I can't just work at any studio I want anymore. So,
My,
but it's mainly Pro Tools. People
yeah.
sometimes use Nuendo. um, and But Pro Tools seems to be the one that won out, you
Okay.
know.
Well,
So
actually, I
yeah,
have a question
and
for
it
the.
has a lot of plugins and various. And now most editors are also mixers. Like we used to leave all the mixing and the uh, cleaning up of sound issues to the mixers. When we got to the dub stage, we would prepare the tracks for them to do. But nowadays, most editors can noise reduce tracks. I could take rain, I could take crickets out of a track without hurting the voice,
Mhm.
with this plugin called RX Clarity Pro or VX Clarity Pro. So it's like you have to learn, and I don't even know enough. I've been retired for 10 years, but I'm still doing sound. But I have younger editors who, they talk to me about all their different things, and it's like I don't know what you're saying. Like it's too
Technology,
technical for me.
technology
Like
is.
I like technical stuff, but I want to use technical for what I need it to do. Like,
Right.
okay, I need to reduce the noise of this, this reverb in the room. What do I use? Oh, okay, de-reverb. Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. Well, that technology certainly has hurled us forward, and we're racing to keep up. But so I had a question that you already answered about young filmmakers. So Charlie,
Sure. You once said, I wish more directors would know the language of sound. They learn about actors, DPs, learning a little sound language won't hurt. Could you expand on that?
Sure, I love that question. So what I learned from Mark Rydell was he has a great hint for making sure you get enough ambient sound without any dialogue in it, because he says, and action. So just what you guys did, you just held completely still, you didn't move. Well, that's what happens on the set. If a director says that, as opposed to going and action, that doesn't do it, or and action, that doesn't do it. But that space between the and the action, where it's just blank ambience that's full of the people on the set, because that's very important when you record like a wild track or room tone, and you get everybody to leave the stage, it doesn't sound the same anymore. It's not the same indigenous sound that goes with that particular scene and take. So he does the same at the end. He goes and cut. And so it gives everybody, especially the actors, they get to like hold still, like they're freezing their positions. The DP, the camera person, knows to keep rolling. Usually they roll a little bit after, just because they're in a moment or something, and it just helps everybody. And why did Mark do that? Did he know that it would help me as a dialogue editor, that I could find, if I had to take out a click or pop, I had that little, 4 seconds of space at the head of the take or at the end of the take that I could use to clean up the sound that's in between. So, and he did, and he knew enough about everybody's job to to buoy them up and to support them. And if he didn't know, he would admit it. And I think that's a mark of a great director. It's like, if you don't know something, don't pretend to know something. You know, I worked on a terrible movie called Bad Company. Should have been called Bad Movie. Um, but it was with Chris Rock. And there was a scene where he's in Central Park, and he's a ticket scalper, and he's on the phone, and he says, "Lion King, I can't do that." And then all of us, I don't do Chris Rock as well as I do Katharine Hepburn's imitation. But anyway, and underneath that, when he says, "I can't do that," you hear some guy saw that they shooting a movie in Central Park, and he goes, "Whoop," like that. and right married to the dialogue. So I did my due diligence. I looked in every outtake. That's the takes they don't use for the film to see if he ever said that again. And he didn't. He improvised it. So I put it down on my cue sheet. We come onto the ADR stage. There's Chris Rock. And the director comes running in from the back room, shaking the pages in my face, going, "Why are we looping this?" Like that, like very, what? Okay. I said, "Well, because there's a big whoop underneath it." And he's like, "Oh, so you mean to tell me we're going to make this actor do this line, and in the time it takes for him to yell at me, we could have looped it like 5 times." But anyway, he says you're going to put in the loop group, and they're going to make noise in the background too, and it'll be just the same. I said, "No, because we'll have control over Oh, you want to direct this movie, Vicky? Okay, go ahead, you direct this movie." It was that kind of. I said, "I'm just trying to make your movie sound good."
Right.
And then I later went and cried, but it's like we don't need that, that kind of abuse. And he didn't loop it.
Well, let's talk
He
about
refused to
another.
loop it.
I'm sorry. I
That's
keep
all right.
you.
You get some more.
Another beautiful quote from you. A sound editor is a storyteller. We help filmmakers tell their stories using creative sound. Can you talk to me a little bit about storytelling through sound?
Well, when you think about storytelling, you think about the words and the imagination that goes with storytelling. You think about sitting around a campfire, or Indians, having people telling stories for generations. And so, our job is to try to enhance the story with the sounds that we think are there. Like, think about a podcast. I'm actually going to be doing a narrative podcast with actors telling, be acting, and then I'm going to create. It's a space type thing, so I have to create a lot of space things, space things to fill it out with sounds for this podcast, if that makes sense. So it's a narrative podcast, but it'll have sound effects as if we were there. It's like a radio play. Think about all the old time radio plays that had, somebody walking where they're like tick 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 tick. Um, and so I think I try to find the parts in that are not on the screen. Like, what else could I put here that helps to sell this particular part of the story? Whether it's an offstage sound, or what can I do to, can I put rain in a scene? Like, I just shot a scene last Thursday in between the raindrops here. We had big rains in LA, and I had a little scene in a shed. And you could hear the rain. We couldn't get away from hearing the rain. It's not supposed to be raining in the movie, but I said, okay, well, either embrace the sound, or you take it all out and redo it. But I ended up putting rain in the scene before it with some thunder to preclude the rain, um, and to sell the fact that we're in the rain. So I just put more rain, and so and it kind of makes it, like, usually those kind of mistakes work better than if you had thought them out. So I like those kinds of things. I don't know if I even answered your question about it, but
Sounds like you did.
you know where I'm going.
I warned you I was going to come back to this question. Have you settled on what is your favorite film, like who you could watch over and over again?
Well, again, it's like story. One of my favorite films is the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, which was supposed to be a feature film, but it ended up on TV. I also like Baghdad Cafe a
Oh,
lot.
what a great
That's one of
movie.
my favorite films. But
Why?
again, I'm doing it for story.
Why
Why
do
do
you
I like that?
Baghdad Cafe?
I like the starkness. I mean, they're out in this desert place, this deserted place, and this German woman comes into a black woman's cafe, and they become friends. And I just like I also like, what's it was Kevin's, My Alien? No, what was it called? Um,
My favorite
yeah,
alien.
no, you're thinking of My Favorite Martian. It wasn't that.
Favorite Martian.
Yeah, it was Kevin Spacey and Farley probably knows it. Farley, put it in the chat.
Farley knows everything.
um, Yeah, My Alien, where the guy has it's an alien and a spaceman together on a deserted planet,
Hmm.
and yeah, I'm waiting for Farley.
Okay.
Okay, well, meanwhile,
But
meanwhile,
yeah, anyway, I like Phil. I like the Portrait of Jenny. I mean, I don't know. I love the Wizard of Oz.
oh, such
Modern films. I mean, when I think about like sound, you know what? Uh, the um, uh, the submarine film that George Waters and C.C. Hall won their Oscar for,
Red
Hunt for Red
October,
October.
Hunt
Well,
for
that was yeah, but then the German film.
Das Boot, Das Boot, Das Boot.
Yes, Das Boot. Yes, the German version of Das Boot is an amazing sound job.
Yeah.
I love that sound
And
job.
how about one of the challenging? How about your most challenging movies that you worked on?
Of mine, probably, and this is going to sound funny. Yes, Enemy Mine. See, I knew Farley would know that. Thank you. Enemy Mine. Yep, that's the
Enemy
one.
Mine. Okay, I did.
I could tell Farley's a real good movie lover. Great.
Must be a
Um,
movie buff.
um, uh, what was it? What was it again that you said,
Challenging,
Liz?
most challenging
Oh,
film.
the challenging was Clan of the Cave Bear. It was my first my only solo sound supervising job that I did not with my mom. It was my first foray into sound supervising, and I worked on that film for a year because all the voiceover could always be done over and over with different, actors, and I was trying to capture the sound of prehistoric times. It's like I don't have pterodactyls in my sound library. I just don't. So I had to create those. And then it takes place in caves. So I actually went to caves and tried to record sound in a cave. But in a cave, you need exits, entrances and exits to make noise, to make wind. Otherwise, it's pretty quiet in there. And then I went to Tippi Hedren's lion sanctuary and to record some lion roars. And I had my PZM, which is called pressure zone microphone, which is like a flat surface that had little bitty holes in the front where the sound would like hit the surface and then go into the microphone. And I had them taped together like back to front, and I'm standing in front. I have my headphones on. I'm standing in front of this lion's cage. He turns around and pees on me, and you can hear the pee like hit the microphone. And I'm like, "Oh no!" I said a different word, but "Oh no!" And the lion trainer, he said, "Oh, he likes you. He's marking you." I said, "What am I supposed to bring a U-Haul and move in? I mean, what does this mean?" So that was a fun adventure. But then I was trying to like make each cave family's fire a different fire, and fire doesn't work that way. Like it's a good concept. So I was, trying to, and then of course it was the film that they decided to use a synthesized score. I mean, if any movie needed a realistic score with authentic instruments, it was that movie.
Mhm.
But they were saving money, supposedly, so they used a whole synthesized score. So it ate up all the levels of my backgrounds. I had these beautiful, glacial vista backgrounds. And the minute you put the music in, you couldn't hear anything anymore because it was synthesized music. So it was challenging, but I loved working, and I loved the book. And when they called me to do the sound job on that, I went, oh, "Really? I get to do the sound on Clan of the Cape?" I was so excited.
Hmm.
So that was a challenge. And as I said, we worked on it for over a year. I had people go off and get married and come back and still work on it because we were constantly changing the voiceover narration of the film and the language. But
Speaking of making friends with lions, in your view, what kind of personality succeeds in the world of sound editing?
Let's see. If you don't want to have a life, or a family, or any other, or make plans for vacations, then you could be a sound editor too.
Oh my goodness.
It's very demanding, and I've it was hard for me because I had two young kids. My husband had died of cancer when I was working on Romancing the Stone, actually, and the studio let me bring home a moviola and a bench, and I worked from like whenever everybody was asleep at night till like 4 in the morning and got a couple hours sleep and then woke up and did the whole thing again. Um, and then I won an MPSE award for working on that, which was very meaningful because he had died, between then. And why was I saying that? Let's see.
Wasn't it fair enough? Like people should know that you need like a
Oh yeah.
work ethic.
Yeah, what they're getting into, because post production is at the end, like you have the shooting schedule and then the editing, and then they have this release date that's hard and fast. So they push the shooting, they push the editing, and then we get like this much time to do the sound, and it's hard because the less time you have, the more people you need. The more people you need to edit, the quality goes down because everybody's doing everything all at once, and it's just very demanding. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times if my kids say, "Oh, Mom, do you remember I did this and this?" It's like, no, what movie was I working on? Like that's what I remember. I don't remember them marching in the Christmas parade, and I know I must have gone there, but I don't, I don't remember things like that. So
I have a question for some of the people starting out in the audience. What resources, books, websites, or communities should they explore getting started?
There's a great book called Sound on Film by Elizabeth Weiss, Weis, and Elizabeth with an S because she's British. It's an older book, but it has a whole lot of essays about the uh, like theories of sound and how we use sound. It's got a great article by Jim Webb, who is a wonderful production sound mixer. And his theory again is you get the voice as clear as possible. There's one on dialogue editing, and his name is escaping me right now. I can send it to you, and people can write to you.
Yeah.
But I think too, to be a sound editor, you just attune yourself to the frequencies of life. You listen. When you go to a cafe, listen to the background sounds, and then you try to recreate that or record it yourself. Listen. I mean, sometimes when I'm working on a film, I'll go out to eat and I'll hear people in the cafe talking. I'll go, that sounds like the Loop Group. It's like, no, these are real people. So it's hard to distinguish between, or listen to the sound of your footsteps when you're walking down an empty hallway, and the reverb, or if you're in a courtroom or any place, just start attuning yourself to what it sounds like. Close your eyes and listen to the environment that you're in and see what it feels like and how it makes you feel to hear those sounds. Like if you're in the mountains, there's a certain sound of the wind in the pine trees and the birds and the footsteps on the pine needles and the river streams and things like that. And start to be just aware of what you can add to a film besides what you're just seeing and hearing being recorded. And I think that helps a lot. And also just, take film classes and, Pro Tools is a whole class in itself of just to use the machine. But as I've told many students in the past, it's like it's just a tool. It doesn't make you an editor just because you know how to run the machinery. You have to think about it. It's like, what's the sexiest part of your body? This always freaks all my students out when I ask them that. But it's your brain. Your brain is creating all the feelings, and you just match that with the sounds that work with it. And it's a lot of experimentation. I mean, nobody goes into working on a film going, well, I'm going to put this and this and this and this. And no, you let the film tell you what it needs. Sort of like having a dog. You want to go out? Do you want to eat? What do you want? Do you have to pee? What are you doing? And you figure it out by the context, and you have a discussion with the director and the film editor. The film editors usually are very involved in the sound process because they're initially putting the sound in. So for these independent films, I always have to make sure, it's like, if you shot with lavs and booms, make sure they get into your editing system, because I have no way of resyncing lavs and booms to do what I need to do edit wise.
Right.
If you have it in your system and then you export it to me in the as an AAF, which is what we use to expand into Pro Tools. It turns a film editor session into a sound editor session. If they don't put it in, I can't access it without a lot of work. So,
Victoria, I want to ask, your mother broke barriers and you've broken them too. And you said there's a lot of work. So is sound editing still a man's world? And how has the industry changed in terms of gender equality?
oh yeah, I've noticed it change a lot. There was a lot more women editors in the past, and I'm not quite sure, why. Yeah, it's always been sort of a man's world. I have this example where I'll be the only woman on the sound stage when we're mixing the film. Like all the mixers are men, and the director and everybody else is usually a man. And I'll say, you know what? It would really sound good if we could put that sound going from left to right. And I think they've heard me. They all kind of acknowledged it. And then 5 minutes later, a guy will stand up and say, you know what? I think we should move that sound from left to right. And they go, that's a really great idea. And I said, hello, I just told you guys that 5 minutes ago. So there's still that kind of prejudice. I've had composers who've said, oh, women can't do sound effects. Women shouldn't do sound effects. It's a man's job. It's like, and then that reminds me of a thing when my mom went from TV editing into film, feature films, because she was good at what she did TV wise. And all the other editors were like, why are you spending so much time? This is just TV. So I hate when people say it's just TV. It's like, no, it's still a legitimate thing. But anyway, she went into to be interviewed for a job on a submarine film. And the producer, I guess, said to her, well, you're a woman. What do you know about the sound of submarines? And some guy that was also waiting to be interviewed, he goes, well, I'm a man. I don't know much about the sound of submarines. It's like, what, which was good of him to do that. But that's kind of the prejudice against it. So it is hard. I think it's also that because now things have gotten so technical, I think men, younger men are just better at it. And in the classes that I've seen, because they've grown up on computers too, so have women. But if you want to have a life, I would say don't go into post production. It's you can't plan vacation. Like somebody said, well, why can't you plan a vacation? It's like, well, because the movie isn't over yet, and it might go over another 2 weeks, and I don't know what's going to happen on the next film. Like you're just floating around,
Right.
unless you're at a studio as a studio employee. But freelance editors, they just never know what they're doing next.
Right.
So it makes it harder, but.
Speaking of other steps, you're also a director. We haven't talked about that much. How has your experience as a sound editor influenced your experience as a director?
Well, yeah, I've always wanted to write and direct things. I got into the AFI's directing workshop for women back in '87, and I thought, oh, good, this will be my ticket out of sound editing. Not that I didn't like sound editing, but I felt like, I was doing that with my mom to spend time with her, and you get good at it, and then people want you to do that. But I really thought I was going to make that transition. I didn't, but that's okay. The directing workshop for women is a great place to go if you want to be a director. But it informed me just because my mom's emphasis and all the directors that I've worked with, all of their influence was about storytelling, and I wanted to tell my own stories and direct other people's stories. And although it's funny, on a film I did called Shelby's Vacation, I hired one of my former students to be the sound recordist. And he said, Vicky, in class, you always said to say and action and cut, like I told you before. He says, you haven't done that once on this film. I said, well, good catch there. But I also know that, there's a lot of pauses between people's dialogue where I can get good fill. But thanks for the reminder. It's like when I'm directing, I take off my sound hat and put on a director's hat. But I'm still, got my finger on the pulse of sound. Like I'm aware of locations and where we're shooting or where the mic placement is and how to, so I think more directors should know those things,
Mm-hmm.
because it just helps their movie. So in directing for me, I'm still hoping to direct a feature. I know it's ambitious, but I have features in me that I want to direct if I have the stamina for it. But it's pretty funny because I can direct, and I work with my co-producing partner and writer, Wendy Fishman, who's written a couple of the short films that we've won awards for, Reflections and You Drive Me Crazy, which was a green screen project, which is crazy. I hadn't done that before, and that was pretty fun. But I think it informs me a lot because it's all I can know where the camera should be placed and the microphone to make the best, you know, or to make less sound problems, I should say. And sometimes you have to embrace the problems, and sometimes you can get around them. But yeah, I like storytelling. So whether I'm doing it with sound or with picture or with editing, because I can, if she writes it and I direct it, then I edit it, and then I export an AAF to myself, and then I do the sound editing, and then I do the mixing. I could do it all in my computer in this space right here. It's pretty crazy. But I do like other people to collaborate, but I'm available and free, so it's like, and sometimes I don't have the budget to pay a real film editor to do so. I would like to have somebody else have a chance at editing something I've directed, just to see, their take on it, because editors, it's film editing is like another chance to write the story.
Right.
There's 3 times that you write. I forget who said that. Was it Fritz Farley probably knows. Fritz Lang, or I forget who said it, but when you write it, when you direct it, and when you edit it are the 3 times that you write a movie. So.
Right. You answered my next question too. You're good at that. So, Charlie, you've got a question.
Sure. What projects are you currently directing or writing? What are you excited about in the next chapter?
Well, actually, in January, I'm doing a short film called Binky's Revenge, which I wrote. And it's a true story that happened with my daughters when they were young. And I'm recreating it with my daughter's daughter, so my granddaughter, who's playing my daughter's role. And it's about two girls taking care of their younger siblings, and they tease them into playing poker with real money and threatening that they could get arrested if they find out, because it's gambling and it's illegal. And mom goes out for the evening, and then they're playing along, and they hear bang 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 on the door, and it's the police, and they're like, what the did you call him? No, I didn't call. Anyway, it turns out at the end of the movie that the cat Binky has knocked the phone off the hook and stepped on the 911 button and called the police, and that's why they showed up. So
Right.
so that should be fun, and hopefully I can shoot that in a day, with 4 kids and a cat. I know, call me crazy. But I have ambitions to do. I just entered a Canon's First Cut a contest with a video pitch. They didn't want, like, choose me, I'm the best, blah, blah, blah. They wanted a video pitch of the project. So that's what I was shooting last Thursday in the rain. And it's like 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And I submitted it. So I'm hoping that the big thing is they fly you to Los Angeles. It's like, but I'm here already. Should I go to Burbank Airport and fly to LA? I don't know. But and then I have the narrative podcast I was telling you about that's coming up, and we have a cool animated feature film that we're working on writing called Commando Cats. It's about the cats who control the rat and mice population at an amusement park.
Oh, that is fabulous.
Yeah, and it's kind of like West Side Story with cats and rats in a way.
Right.
But it's like a musical animated with cats and rats. Yeah. So
Awesome.
there's a bunch of things. I mean, I have very big ambitions, but I have very little money to make them. So, we're just putting all the feelers out there, and I'm finishing sound work on a comedian special, a 45-minute comedian special, which I have to finish today after we hang up. And just life stuff. So I'm excited about it all.
My next question was going to be, speaking of the future, we talked about AI. So and you already answered my question about AI affecting jobs and things like that. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of technology, or Charlie, do you want to take it to the next?
Well, I guess we covered AI, but we haven't covered, you've worked with filmmakers around the world. Do you see a difference between European films and Hollywood films?
Yeah, I think European films have a much slower pace to them. They kind of respect the audience more. I think American films we're too much into like the TikTok, fast cuts, It's like if you watch a clip. Oh, Singing in the Rain is also one of my favorite films.
Oh, there you
If you watch the Singing in the Rain clips about sound, I mean, it really is a movie about sound. You know, where they were silent films, and then the star of the silent film has a squeaky little voice like this. So they're like, we can't record her voice, and then they looped Debbie Reynolds in place of the that star. And why was I saying that?
We're talking about European.
If you watch the dance sections of that film, there's very few cuts because they actually were dancing, you know. And when you see a movie where it's like you see the couple and then you see their feet and then you see them twirl and you know
Yeah.
the editor's just going crazy. It's like, okay, those people couldn't really dance, so they had to piecemeal this thing together. So sometimes lingering on a shot is a better choice than just chopping it up and editing, you know. There's a scene in On Golden Pond where Katharine Hepburn dives off the boat and swims across to save Henry Fonda because he fell out of the boat and hit his head on a rock, and the editor had cut, like, you see her jumping and then he cut to like a shot of Henry and then another shot of her coming up from the water. And my mom knew that she had actually done the whole scene herself, and my mom suggested to the film editor, which you know you sort of don't do, you know. And she said, no, show her doing it all herself because that's really dynamic that she did it herself. It wasn't a stunt person. She actually dove in the water and swam across, you know, and he was doing it probably to save time or to create energy or something. So sometimes just leaving things alone is the best choice.
Right.
So I think that's what European films feel different to me than American films.
So speaking of European films, we're over here in Europe. Do you have any aspirations as far as directing European films?
That would be great. I wouldn't turn it down. If you want me to come over there and direct something, I'll be on a plane
Okay.
tomorrow.
All right, I'll put the light on for
Yeah.
you.
Okay. Leave the light on. Yeah, no, I mean that would be great. I just did a student of mine, a former student of mine, who was on the Naked and Afraid series. Her name's Allison Teal, and she has a thing called Allison's Adventures, and it's one L, Allison's Adventures, and she shot a film in Ireland with just her boyfriend, and the other guy who's in the movie, and a drone operator. And they did this film, and she called me up crying. She goes, I know I took your sound classes and I'm trying to do this all myself, but I just can't. Can you help me? You know, I
Oh.
said, sure. So, well, it took me like, I don't know, 2 weeks to do the sound on her film, but it's really cute. It's called The Ghost of Dunluce Castle. And she
Mhm.
narrated, but every shot had like waves and crashing against rocks and horses on the cliffs. And, you know, and I'm trying to like augment it all with the sound, but, you know, it would be great to shoot a thing in Ireland. And she said, well, you could come stay at this castle. I can get you 2 free nights. It's like, well, I'm not going to come all the way there for 2 nights
Yeah.
at a castle. I'd have to buy a few more nights, but yeah, it would be great to do that.
Well,
Yeah.
listen, this has been amazing, an absolute honor. Your wisdom, your
Me
story,
too.
passion, and have been inspiring for all of us, our viewers, and I'm sure Charlie and myself as well.
Yeah, we definitely need a second part to continue this conversation. There's so much to explore with you.
Yeah, I think so. To everyone watching, thank you for joining us for this special
Yeah.
episode.
I'm Charlie.
I'm Liz, and this has been
I'm Vicky.
Vicky, of course, and this
This
has been the cinematic
Bridge, the art of filmmaking, presented to you by Golden Gate Films. Thank you, and see you in our next episode.
All right.